Дякуємо всім, що приєднуєтесь. Нагадую, що наша зустріч буде транслюватися на YouTube-каналі Education USA Ukraine і також буде в записі. Всі матеріали будуть доступні для вас. А для початку я хочу сказати декілька слів, як завжди, про Education USA і подякувати за те, що ви приєднуєтесь до нас щовівторка і активно берете участь. Education USA – це мережа державного департаменту, що надає точну і повну інформацію про навчання в США. І якщо ви зацікавлені у такій інформації і хотіли б дізнатися про можливості навчання, фінансування освіти та інші питання, то, будь ласка, пишіть нам на пошту, і ми з радістю вас проконсультуємо. Всі послуги Education USA безкоштовні. Сьогодні наша 8-ма зустріч в рамках проєкту «Освіта у воєнний та післявоєнний час». І одним з напрямків роботи Education USA Ukraine є спеціальні проєкти, що фінансуються Державним департаментом США і покликані підтримувати освіту в Україні під час війни та після її завершення. Я дуже рада, що ви з нами дійшли вже так далеко, до 8-ї зустрічі. І нагадую про вашу активність. Якщо ви хочете отримати брендовані подарунки Education USA, будь ласка, приєднуйтеся надалі. У нас залишається ще 2 зустрічі, і беріть активну участь в обговореннях і вправах. Я дуже рада представити сьогодні вам наших нових експертів, спікерів Рут і Карлос. Дякую за ваш час, дякую за можливість почути вашу експертну думку і хочу передати вам слово.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Kарлоsa Asevesa, and I work for the Center for Victims of Torture. And here with me also it's my colleague, who maybe you can introduce yourself. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Very happy to join you today. And yes, my name is Rut Pітерман, and I am one of the trainers here today from the Center for Victims of Torture. I am a psychotherapist and trainer working with resilience and well-being. Very good to be with all of you today.
Yes. Thank you, Ruth. So, well, first of all, let me talk a little bit about CVT, just very, very briefly. CVT is the Center for Victims of Torture. It's an organization that started in 1985 in the US, and starting in the 90s, we started to give international services. First in Africa, then in the Middle East, and it's a little bit everywhere right now. And there's 2 things that I would like to point out from CVT. Is that very early when we started to work, and particularly when we started to work in the world, we saw that the workers and the people who work there, like me, we kind of felt the impact of the work that we were doing. We were very happy from doing this work, working with refugees, with people who have endured armed conflicts, wars, etc. But as a worker, as a mental health professional, like me or Ruth, or even many others who are not specifically in the part of mental health, we started to feel that this job was very rewarding, but also very difficult for us emotionally. And the second thing is that I want to point out about CVT is that we started with services with mental health and being very focused on mental health, but little by little, we have expanded a little bit more. First of all, to work with, for example, with human rights defenders. This work we do a lot in the Middle East. And also working with other organizations in partnership for doing capacity building, and that has helped us to see many parts of the world. And so we have seen as well that these organizations, these human rights defenders, they also have kind of like the same experiences as we do, in the sense of difficult time on themselves and difficult emotional time for themselves when they start to do this work. So we have worked a lot in ways in which we can provide this self-care for other people and even for ourselves, and also the staff care, which is going by hand, which is with the idea that not only the worker, the person is responsible, but also the organization. It needs to do certain things in order to take care of the well-being of everyone. So here are some of our thoughts, our experiences, and some of our tips. We will get through them, and hopefully you enjoy this presentation. We have only 1 hour, but we'll be trying to be quick and then pack as many information and tips for you to do this. Well, to have kind of like in your how do I say, for you to have kind of like in the tools, in the so you can have kind of like any tool to do this self-care and to remain very positive, very motivated in your work despite the difficulties and the challenges. Okay.
Great, thank you, Carlos. So as Carlos said, we don't have too much time, but we do want to just spend a little bit of time helping you to ground and to connect some of these activities or ideas that we will be discussing into very practical ways that you can be using these skills. So first, we just want to start with a very simple welcome and grounding. So this is going to be participatory. We invite you to participate as you feel comfortable and in the way that feels good to you. But just start by thinking about what is one thing in your environment, so around you, where you're located. What is one thing right now that brings you comfort, support, or joy? And it can be anything. There's no right or wrong. And I see that there is a hand up already. And you can put it in the chat as well. And we can hear from a few.
Пані Світлана? Так, ми
I
бачимо.
see some shared. Mm. Mm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my embroidery kit. Yeah. Oh, yes. Mm. Mm. Wonderful. All right, so thank you all for just taking a minute to just recognize what sources of comfort, joy, or support are with you in the present moment, and that actually perhaps you didn't even realize in this moment is there for you as a resource of care and sustainability. So as you have identified this thing, whether it was your coffee, I also have my cup of coffee in front of me, or whether it was your kids or the sunshine, I invite you just to take a breath into that resource as you put your eyes on that resource or you hold on to it, whatever it is, and just to take a deep breath into that resource of comfort, support, or joy that you have available to you in this moment, and to recognize that it is here for you. So we'll take a breath in, however that feels to you. And just release that. Okay, I know that we are in the morning, but I know that you are later. Most of you perhaps are later in the day, and so perhaps you have already experienced and been doing a lot in the day. So this is just a chance for you to drop your shoulders a little bit and to be thinking a little bit about how to care for yourself. Okay, so Carlos is going to explain to what our agenda is for our time together here.
Okay, thank you. So what we want to do, how we organize this, was first of all, we are going to define self-care. What is it and what is not? Also, we recognize that there's a specific exposition that you might have to this, to trauma and to traumatic experiences, particularly if you are teaching kids in the context of, well, not only kids, but also people in the context of an armed conflict. So we talk a little bit about that, particularly recognizing the trauma in your context. And then we'll go taking care of yourself. Before you do your professional activity, during doing your professional activity, and then afterwards. We also talk a little bit about the responsibilities that also your organization have with you, things that it's very good that you are taking care of yourself, but also how to be organizationally, how they can take care of you as well. And finally, we'll give you a tool to monitor yourself and to create this awareness of how are you, and then what are the things that you should do probably to get better. Okay. Thank you, Ruth.
Great, thank you, Carlos. So with our agenda for the day, we're just going to start by inviting you to think about self-care. So what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of self-care? It could be the same things, or it could be very different things. It could be large things, it could be small things. There is no right or wrong. So again, you can put this in chat, or if you would like to unmute and say something, you are welcome to as well. So I see some alone time, rest.
Дякую. Поки наші учасники пишуть варіанти. Якщо хтось хоче вимкнути мікрофончик і сказати голосом, це також можливо. В чаті у нас є здоров'я, відпочинок, час для себе, здоров'я, здорове харчування, родина, подорож, гарний сон, хороше товариство, прогулянки, відпочинок, перезавантаження, подорож, відпочинок, сон. Спілкування з близькими, відпочинок знову, сон, море, час на відпочинок, відпочинок на природі, спілкування з друзями, море, позитивні емоції, подорож, природа.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you so much. And I saw someone wrote hugs. Silly, but I don't think it's silly at all. Hugs are really important. And in fact, one of a very simple thing you can do is actually to give yourself a hug too, if there isn't somebody else there to give you a hug. But it's really wonderful to see, you know, what you think of, right, when you think of self-care. There are some internal resources and things that you do to care for yourself. And then there are also the external pieces, you know, going to the seaside, right? And then there are some like relationship pieces of like connection with your daughter or connection with others in your family, your kids, taking time for yourself, as Sana is saying. Wonderful. So as you think about self-care, there's then this additional question: how has it shifted for you in your role as a teacher after the invasion? Have you noticed a shift? So just kind of noticing and asking yourself that question: what has shifted? Have you noticed that the need for self-care has changed? And again, if you would like, you can put a few reflections in the chat. Oh, thank you. Go ahead. Mm, mm,
Так, і також у нас є варіант тепер весь час в подорожі. З'явилося розуміння, що не все залежить від мене. Почала більше читати новини. Зникла можливість відпочивати без телефона. Змінилися пріоритети і цінності. Хочеться більше часу приділяти рідним. Більше ціную життя. Пригнічений стан. Знову цінності змінилися. Неуважні до свого стану. Є такий варіант. Змінився формат роботи. Змінилися цінності, повторюється ще раз. Більше ціную людей, які поруч.
Wow, so we really do hear a range of different things, right? So in terms of a shift in kind of values, a shift in priorities. For some of us, a realization that we need to attend to our care of ourselves more. And for some of us feeling like we don't have the space to do that, or we have, we feel more overwhelming feelings, or that we're feeling more depressed, for example. So yeah, so just to really just the recognition that that things could have shifted, and that your definition of self-care, or how self-care looks for you, could be different as you are going through and supporting working with students that are impacted. So what we just want to name is that self-care is not, and as we saw this from the chat and what people shared, is not the same for everyone. So, oftentimes some people think, oh yeah, self-care is always, going on a long holiday, or a long bath, or, but just really recognizing that self-care can be the small things. It could be just even identifying that resource, the thing that brings you comfort or strength in that moment as well. So self-care is not the same for everyone. It is not adding more tasks to your to-do list. And so when you already have so much going on and you are doing so much, is recognizing that it's not another task that you have to get done. That self-care should not be a response to an emergency, and Carlos will be speaking about this in a little bit as well, really thinking about how self-care is something that you can do proactively and preventatively, and that you can make part of your ongoing practice, and it's not something that should just be done in response to an emergency. And it is certainly not acting selfishly. And that really self-care is an act of preservation and sustainability in this work, as Carlos was saying a little bit earlier as well. All right, so I will hand this over now to Carlos, who will be going through a little bit more around some of the impacts. I think you're still on mute, Carlos.
Yes, thanks, Ruth. There's one of the things, I really love the variety of ideas that you are sharing with us. And I wanted to say that one of the things that we see differently, I don't want to assume much more, but this is usually what happens, is that people who have like these professions like you do, when you have a lot of contact with another person, like in your case, teaching, in the case of armed conflicts, they are a little bit more exposed to all these different changes of context, and also the impact that this armed conflict has, in this case, in your students. And then your students might come and talk to you about these issues. And so this is what so you have kind of like a new risk in this new context, which is like, because of the a higher exposure to these traumatic experiences, to these difficult stories, this change of context on your students. Maybe even if you didn't have to endure these difficult experiences, you are enduring them by the exposure of these experiences with your students. So this is a little bit what we call vicarious trauma. It's a response that it's possible to have when you are working every day, every single day with people who have endured these traumatic experiences. By traumatic experiences, I'm talking about, you know, a lot of impact of the violence. Sometimes a traumatic experience by definition has a very difficult loss. So children or students who have had, you know, the loss of their school, of their place where they were living, of their family members, etc. So because of this, sometimes you might also, you may be very committed, as I hear from your responses. And so it is easier to get a little bit burned out, which means to become quite exhausted by your job because of the intensity emotionally and just time-wise. Some of you talked about traveling a lot, so there's more task put into your plate. And so these difficult tasks makes you, well, feeling a little bit more exhausted. And sometimes even we talk about moral injury. Sometimes as workers, we have to do things that are very difficult, or sometimes like the things that we do doesn't seem enough to get on the situation. I'll give you an example of myself. For example, sometimes I work in Ethiopia, and sometimes I give mental health service for certain clients, but I know that there's all of this community that I cannot take care of, even if I can. And so that for me, morally, ethically, it feels wrong about taking care of 10 people instead of 100, or taking care of 100 people instead of 1,000, and so on. So this moral injury, it talks about when there's difficult decisions, when there's difficult things for us ethically that we wanted to do more and we are not able to do it. So this is kind of like the bad part of it. This is kind of like the risk that we have, or the threats that we might have by working, teaching, helping people with education in a new context of conflict. But there is also some things that are good, or that are new, that it's an opportunity also for us to grow or to feel better about our job and about ourselves. So basically, we call it vicarious growth. And this means that sometimes by giving, for example, in your case, education to children who are in a very difficult situation, in an armed conflict, providing them with space for learning, for growing, despite the challenges, sometimes it feels like a lot of satisfaction from it. So even the experiences and the resilience that you see in these children, like the ability to go on despite all the odds, that really, sometimes it gets contagious, that spirit and that really nice things that we see in the children. So to make sure that we have this vicarious growth, we need to support it with a little bit of staff care and self-care. What I mean by that is that we can start doing a little things for ourselves to make our job more sustainable. And also, we can ask the organization to do certain things for us. So again, the job becomes more sustainable, and that we make sure that we are in this part, in this right-hand part, which is the vicarious growth part, instead of the vicarious trauma one. So we will see a little bit how to recognize these two, and then we will see a few tips on how to stay a little bit more in the vicarious growth with this new set of challenges. Okay, so, but first of all, let's see what happens to the children and youth. Okay, so we were talking about that sometimes, like this vicarious trauma, vicarious comes from seeing, right? So sometimes it's also called secondary trauma. So the children or the youth that we are giving services to might have traumatic experiences. So from either direct abuse or witnessing some of the abuse as well, or, you know, some of the contextual factors that are new in the situation that Ukraine is happening now. For example, you know, sometimes there might be a sleep deprivation, malnourishment, neglect, or just, you know, abandonment when it's family separation, forced migration. All of these things are part of the experiences that the children might have. So the children and the youth start to respond to this in ways that that it's going to try to help them. Is there an attempt, is there a strategy to deal with these situations of the traumatic experiences? So, for example, the cognitive responses, it's that the attention, memory, and learning and the performance of education we will expect it to be a little bit deteriorated. But I really want to explain a little bit more. Why do we think like this is happening? So it's not because they are sick or anything. It's just because they are focusing their attention a little bit more on the traumatic memories, trying to resolve that sense of safety. Okay, so it's not that they're becoming ill, but it's more that the resources from their mind, from their brains, they have to be engaged into something else rather than the, you know, studying mathematics or geography. And so these are usually the cognitive responses. This is also usually something that the teachers can pick up very, very quickly. This student of mine was very good. She or he was very, very sharp. Now, in this situation, it seems like his performance is much bad, it's much worse. Okay. Some of the other things that the students will show, it's irritability of anger. And again, it's trying to react something quickly to the threat. If I'm irritable, it's because that way I can protect myself quicker. There might be a lot of sadness or crying, trying to resolve their losses. And there might be a lot of fear or anxiety, and it's trying to avoid the potential threats. If I'm fearful all the time, that means that I will be quick to respond to any threat that is happening in the outside to me. And again, like the behavioral reactions that we might see, is that children or youth might become more aggressive, more isolated, shyness. Yes. So there might be even, like in children, there might be kind of like a regression on their developmental issues. For example, a 9-10-year-old might be starting to wet the bed again. And usually these developmental regressions, it's a strategy for the kid as well, or for the child, to get some comfort as before. So, for example, also the children might become very clingy or very attached to one person and then not able to detach or to be a little bit more independent. So these developmental regressions also happen a lot in children who have experienced trauma. And finally, one thing is that reproducing the traumatic events in their play. Sometimes, like what happened in the past, like it was very difficult. Children might play a lot with that, or also, repeatedly trying to express it in many different ways. What they're trying to do is to master it, to have a sense of control over this issue. Okay. So we, as I told you a little bit, we have worked also in Ethiopia, and we have, which there's an active conflict. Well, it just ended, an active conflict in there. And one of the things that we saw is that teachers were in a very, very good position to actually do a lot of good to their students and to the whole society, as always used to happen. So in other places that we have worked, also we have seen that teachers have like a very great position to see which of the students are responding very difficult to this trauma. So one of the things that it's for your students, but it also might help you as part of the self-care, is to think about how to do teaching when we have this information for trauma. Mm-hmm. So just very few things or very few tips is that the expectations might be a little bit reduced. So as I said, for example, maybe you as a teacher, you want to challenge your students and to actually achieve a lot of learning. However, in these moments, like the expectations should be a little bit corrected, in the sense that maybe the children are not performing as good as they would before. And I also had kind of like some experiences with the students that actually had like overachievement during these times. And this sometimes it's because they are kind of like obsessively focusing on one thing that they can control, which is their studies. And the problem is that they are not taking care of themselves emotionally. So even if your students are overachieving at this time, sometimes that could be kind of like a warning sign on saying like, well, yes, but by doing that, what are they not taking care of that might be important? So having some compassion and also kind of like a reduced expectation from their achievement, it's part of this trauma-informed teaching. Another thing is that we talked about that trauma can be very isolating and people could just like really close themselves. And this is the symptoms of trauma and the chronicity and the severity of the trauma gets worse and worse when we are isolated. So just helping the students to socialize among themselves and with you, it's just a great way to help them to overcome or to face better these traumatic issues, but also in yourself, like when you are facing them and when you are talking to them and having a relationship with them, helping this socialization, it also helps you. It is strange because we would think like, okay, well, if they are a threat to me or they are having all these traumatic experiences that I make contagious, to me, actually, the more that you have a relationship with them, the better is for them and for you. The only thing is that sometimes these emotions might get a little bit too intense. If we have children that are crying all the time or very aggressive, very fearful, very isolated. So teaching some emotional containment to the students can be also a very good thing for this trauma-informed teaching, so they can go on to understand and to get the class and to get their achievements better if their emotions are in a level that they can still do things. And finally, just providing for them a safe space would help them to also to overcome, like, and what I mean by a safe space is to have a little bit of time for them to express whatever is in your mind or in their emotions. That would help also for them to have kind of like an outlet, a little bit of a escape route from carrying all these challenges in their backs every day. So this is basically a lot of trauma-informed teaching. Although we didn't want to focus on this, we wanted to say, like, only this as a part of the strategy of taking care of yourself is when you feel also efficient, that you are helping your students. So this is why we put it here, although we're not going to go too deep into it. Yes. Okay, so is this mine as well? Yes. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I just wanted to refocus a little bit on the part of the self-care, and I wanted you to think of a football player. You know, I come from a country that has a lot of football, and everybody's crazy about football, and you know, I guess Ukraine as well. It's football. It's also very popular. So to think about a football player, I think about like a lot that their profession has a lot of physical activity, and it's very easy to think that when they are professional football players, that they will get injured at some point of their career. It's not whether they can avoid it or they cannot. It's more, when are they going to get injured? You know, hopefully these injuries are not so bad, but what they do because of that intense physical activity, it's what they do is that they prepare themselves. They do a lot of training, like 4-6 hours of exercise every day, in order to become very strong and in order to become prepared for the possibility of that injury. Now, during also during the match, I don't know, for example, a goalie, if you see how they throw themselves to the ball and then just fall, you know, and they didn't get hurt. If I do that, of course, I'm gonna get like 3 ribs broken. So they do something during the game. They prepare their bodies somehow during the game to stand the falls, to stand the hits, and then even not get injured. And then also after the game, they are they also do like stretching, flexing, physiotherapy, all these activities that would help them not to become injured after all the physical strength that they had to put during the game. So we're using this metaphor for something that it's also happening to you. Well, in your case, there's not a lot of physical activity, a little bit, but not a lot of physical activity that is required for your work. But in this case, there is, because of the situation, you have a lot of emotional activity at this moment, and you might get hurt from that. So there is we are going to go through, before you go to the teaching part, what are the things that could help you during while you're doing teaching, and then after your contact with them. So you remain very strong emotionally, and you can do things that help strengthen your emotions, so you can endure this. finally, I put a question here. If that's so much trouble of doing this football, they have to train like 6 hours a day, and they have to do a lot of things during the match, and they have to do a lot of things after the match. If there's so much trouble on doing that, why do they do it? And this is kind of like an idea, kind of like a question that I give to you, in the sense that this job of teaching and education might be a lot more difficult now. It added a different dimension right now. So it's very good to think about in the back of our head, why do we do it? In the case of a football player, I'm sure it's because of the money and the glory and all these things, you know, and just the feeling probably when they score a goal and then all the stadium is chanting their names. Of course, that's a great feeling. So in your case, it's very important to start detecting what are the things, when the stadium chant for you, you know, what are the things that are really rewarding of this, because this is going to help us to get through all the challenges that you might have. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Carlos, for framing all of that. So when we think about here the before, during, and after the game, we're just going to go through very quickly some of the ideas or tips that you can be thinking about. So as you see here, you know, there's a different range of things that you can do. It always starts with self-awareness, you know, and even with that activity that we started at the beginning of, like checking in about, you know, in your environment, right where you are in the present, you know, what is a source of comfort, joy, or support. That is a first piece, even of an example of self-awareness, of just recognizing, okay, where am I right now? You know, what do I have that is a resource that is available to me to care for myself? You know, how am I feeling right now? Just checking in with yourself. And that is a really important thing to be able to do as you're, you know, preparing to go into a setting where you might be holding the container for a lot of emotions or a lot of stress, in addition to, you know, transfer of knowledge and things like that. And so like Carlos was saying, you know, when you ask yourself, why do I do this? Why would I, you know, care for myself and my emotions so that I can do this work? It helps you to think a little bit about your values, you know, what it is that you value about your work as a teacher, why it is that you are in this profession, and why you continue to do this work, even in the face of challenge. And that can really help you to stay grounded and connected to your purpose and your vision, which is very protective when we think about self-care. So a couple of other things that you can be doing. One thing is to always check in with your body, to notice how you hold stress in your body. For some of us, perhaps we hold it in our shoulders, or perhaps we hold it in our jaw, or perhaps we hold it in our heads or in our lower backs. You know, and just noticing, you know, where we hold it. And we notice, like, you know, Carlos was saying, right, when footballers are preparing for their games, you know, they are strengthening their bodies, and it really depends on kind of perhaps past injuries that they have experienced, or areas of weakness, but also areas of strength in their bodies. And so that self-awareness is really important for us to be able to continue to strengthen our bodies and our emotions and our psychology in a way that really helps us to sustain. So really noticing, where do we hold that stress in our body? What do we need to release? Like perhaps it is about, you know, doing more neck and shoulder, or maybe more stretching, right? Breathing. What can we do to really help our body to prepare for this work and to release the stress that we hold? Reminding ourselves about where we hold it and what we can do to release. So then here again, breathing exercises, you know, balancing your emotions. Many of you put in the chat so many different ideas for things that you do for your own care. So what are things that you can do before you go into the game, before you actually go into a session, into teaching a class? What are things that you can do to bring yourself into balance or to calm your body if you're noticing that you yourself are experiencing some stress? And then, things like meditation or reading, praying, cooking, gardening, just sitting in the sunshine. For me, something that I really like to do is to ground is just to go outside and barefoot and just stand on the ground and just feel the grass or the ground underneath my feet, to raise my arms and to breathe. So it's something very quick and very simple that I can do, but that really helps me to stretch and to ground as well. So just a reminder that you do not have to do all of these things, but it's really about thinking about for yourself what is most effective in preparing for your work. And so just to make it a little bit more practical for you, and perhaps you already do many of these things, right? But just to think about, what are some practices or rituals that you already engage with to care for yourself before class, before you teach? What are some things that you already do? And perhaps if you have some examples, you can put them in the chat. What are some things that you already do? And we'll just give it a minute here because I know that we're still needing to move through quite quickly with time. And perhaps we'll just see, yes, something simple like drinking a glass of water. Thank you, Ina. Yeah. So it can be really simple, right? Have your coffee. Yeah. Walk to work listening to music. Yeah. So, and music is a very powerful tool as well, because it really is one of the only actually art forms that really engages both brain and body. So music helps to regulate emotions. It can help us to, feel calmer. It can help us. And then you're walking to work. So there's also some physical activity, which helps you to prepare your body. Great. So thank you for sharing, and just an invitation to continue thinking about what are the things that you can do before you go into a session. All right, and this is back to Carlos here.
Yeah, can I just say also about this point that maybe, like you say, for example, there was a comment saying like, I just drink my coffee. Oh, probably it's a good way to think. Like probably I might incorporate more rituals before coming into my work and coming to the difficult things if I see that it's a little bit insufficient. So maybe I can grab one of two responses from my colleagues, and they say like, okay, well, maybe I'm gonna listen to music more, and so on. So okay, well, this part also it's about thinking positively. Thank you very much. That's a nice one. So this also a part in which I was telling you, for example, the goalie when he goes and tries to catch the ball and then falls, they know how to fall. They know how to, or maybe when they are running and somebody's trying to kick them in their legs, they know how to avoid that, or they know how to take a hit even. So that's for the footballers. So for us, how do we do that in the moment? How do we get some skills to take care of ourselves while you are doing the teaching? So while you are doing the teaching, probably your students will have some needs and thoughts and feelings that are challenging. So for example, if somebody comes with a story about what just happened to their family, well, that's very challenging for any teacher. It might get a lot of emotions. So, or if they come and they don't tell you this story, but they just kind of like have this really difficult or challenging behavior that before it was not used to be there. And so they become very aggressive, for example. So what do you do in those times to take care of yourselves? So there's many things, and then there would be, and there is many things, and there's many tools from your teaching, from all your profession. But I think like one of the most important ones is to give yourself a little bit of space for all those tools, all those ideas to come to your help. And so this is what we call sometimes like this pendulum attention, in the sense that when you are only start only focusing on what are the needs of your student, or for example, well, this really challenging behavior that they are very aggressive or that they are very sad and everything, it's difficult to bring all the tools that you might have already, and then also your strength emotionally. So sometimes, like, it's nice to recover a little bit, and as you see, like, I'm getting a little bit far from here, and then to recover a little bit of yourself, to put the focus on your own body, on your own needs, and then on your own thoughts, to see how can you deal with this, how can you deal with this issue, or how it's making you feel. And then once you recover that strength, then come again to your student and you know, and talk things through. So this issue, it's kind of like pendulum on that attention. So getting close to your student, hear what they need, and get it a little bit far from your student, and see what you need, or what are your resources to attend to that. Okay, so this is something that it takes a little bit of practice to get. I hope that that it takes a little bit of practice. I would say, like, let's skip this part because of the time. So, but it's just the idea, just to give you the idea of this pendulum attention, in which if it's getting too difficult, just breathe in and then just recover yourself a little bit, and try to think what are your own needs and how can they match.
Great. All right, so if we move to this next piece, so in terms of the after the game, and again, this is similar to pre-game, but just kind of, especially if things have occurred during the session or during class that have been activating or that have been challenging, that have brought up a lot for you, but also you've been holding a lot, you know, in terms of attention and care for your students. What do you do to help you perhaps release, right, some of the tension that you might be holding, like whether it's going for a walk, going into nature, you know, whether it is releasing through art, listening to music, right, connecting with others, connecting with your family, connecting with colleagues, finding ways to debrief, to rest, right, making sure you're getting enough sleep. People mentioned earlier as well around, like, eating good food, you know, right? Do we meditate? Do we pray? Or do we, you know, just go outside and, like I said, go out and ground. So just an invitation for you to think about what are the things that you can do after the game to care for yourself. And again, for you to think about what is one simple thing that you can do to care for yourself after a difficult day or a difficult class. And perhaps it's the same thing that you do before in your pregame, and that is fine too. But just really thinking about, right, that you're making it an intentional practice. So as we think about this, here's a little table that we share here around, you know, making sure that you're planning ahead and that you're making it a practice. You could even create a table like this for yourself. So it's a visual reminder for yourself about what am I doing before, what are my pre-activities, right? What am I doing during, like practicing the pendulum attention. And then, like Carlos said, there are many other things that you're doing as well. Maybe breathing, right, to regulate your emotions, right? Noticing your reactions, right? And planning to follow up later, for example. And then what do you do right after? What are your transitions, right, from class? And I see also some people sharing, right, after I take a shower, I listen to music, to have a walk, not to think about anything. Yeah, so moving your body, releasing, going to bed, getting rest. Yeah, so it's great. So it's great that you already have those things that you are practicing, and perhaps if you notice that you used to do those things and you've stopped, or perhaps you don't make it a regular activity, just to remind yourself that, you know, making it a ritual, making it a practice is really helpful. Just having your pre-game routine and then your post-game routine, right? And so the later ongoing things are also related to the prevention and kind of the pre-game activities. And some of those things are also larger things, right? Really like building compassion for yourself, like being gentle with yourself. I think for a lot of care providers, people who, you know, care for others, sometimes there can be a lot of self-criticism about, am I doing enough? You know, did I respond to that well? You know, and so really practicing some self-compassion and self-kindness as well. Yeah, so Sophia shares, after a difficult class, I find it helpful just to have a bite with my colleagues I'm in friendly terms with and just have a chat. Yeah, so connecting with your colleagues where you can, the social engagement is really important. So again, just moving here to a little bit of a summary, just a reminder that caring for yourself really is caring for your students. And just, you know, when we asked you to think about what self-care means to you, several of you said, like, now I really realize that after the invasion, like, self-care is really so much more important, that I really need to give it more attention. So just the recognition that it's not something that you do less of when you are feeling more stressed, but that really is something that you need to be sure to be more intentional about actually engaging with. So again, just a few ideas when it comes to trauma-informed teaching and self-care. That you personally can use check-in and check-out rituals. This is some ideas for yourself that perhaps you can incorporate these into your class activities or your workshops or sessions, that at the beginning, everybody can do a quick check-in. One simple thing that I really like to do is, like, on a scale of 10, I say if 10, you know, if you're feeling, you know, really a lot of energy, but it doesn't feel good, and 1 is no energy and it doesn't feel good. But in the middle, 5 and 6 is your kind of place of balance, your sweet spot where you feel like I have good energy and it feels really good. So if you present something like a scale and you invite your students to check in and say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you right now? Are you at a 2? Are you at an 8? Are you at a 6? It really can be very helpful for everyone to just get a sense of how the class is doing, and for you as a teacher to really get a sense of how the class is doing as well. And so if you notice everybody is on an 8 or a 9 where they have high energy and it doesn't feel good, you can start the class even with a stretch or, you know, with a breath, right? So just really having these rituals, even as part of your class activities, that can really help you to support each other. So find simple ways to acknowledge emotions or stress responses that help to contain the experience. So again, like noticing like if people are putting themselves higher on the scale, or if people are sharing that they are going through a really difficult time, right? Making sure that you are acknowledging it and welcoming whatever is there, right? That emotions are okay, but also finding ways to contain it, right? Because I think sometimes if you do have students that are bringing up experiences and then they want to talk about it, but being clear in your guidelines around how this space is a container for whatever comes up, but what your kind of guidelines are in terms of boundaries of the space, because that keeps everybody safe as well. Because sometimes we can think we're being compassionate by, you know, giving space for one student to just really talk about all of their experiences in the class. But that also sometimes can be challenging in terms of containing the experience for that student, but also for your class, right? And I know as a teacher, you're balancing the individual experience alongside the group experience. I know that's a constant dance for you as teachers as well. So again, consider including grounding and regulating activities. So I don't know how long your kind of classes are, but it could be even like on the every half hour or 45 minutes or 90 minutes, just doing a stretch, just doing a stomp your feet, or maybe just like, you know, doing something that helps to ground and regulate. Or it could even be identifying one thing, right, that brings you comfort, joy, or support, and just having a chance to connect to that. Normalizing responses to stress and crisis. You know, as Carlos was saying, you know, there are many reactions that can show up for children and youth in response to trauma and traumatic stress, and just the recognition that whatever shows up is our body's way of just coping with the stress, and that's okay, and that together we can find ways to cope. And part of it is just the recognition that that it's a normal response. affirm strengths and draw on resources. So just again, the recognition of strengths in the group, individual strengths, and the resources. And this is why we also did this activity at the beginning around, you know, what is a resource in your environment, just to recognize that everybody has resources, even if sometimes they feel like they don't. Maintain structure and supportive boundaries. And so this is also related to the containment of tending to the group as well as to the individual. And so really being able as the teacher to be able to hold those boundaries and that structure as well. And really structure is really helpful. When people experience trauma or traumatic stress, it can feel very chaotic and dysregulating. And so sometimes having a simple routine and rhythm as part of your classes can really be supportive. And then lastly, again, it's really important as the teacher to really model care for yourself. So if you notice that you are coming in at a 10 or a 9 on the scale, to model that care, to say, oh, you know, I just noticed I came in from a very hard day, or, you know, it's been a lot this week. Maybe you've been hearing news about things back in Ukraine or in Ukraine, just to say, let's all just start by taking a breath together. We're all here with each other now. Carlos, anything to add to this before we move on?
No, I think it's great. I think hopefully, yes, there's things that speak to you and things that resonate with you. And yes, it would be great. I think we're running out of time, but I really want to talk about just that, as we usually say, self-care is not about only you, but also it's thank you. Like one of the options is team building game. Yes, that's really, really great. And then, so, but it's also like the responsibility, it's also about the organizations and the schools. We cannot do it everything by ourselves. So also if we are part of management, it's important to think about how do we facilitate or give access to self-care for all the people who are working in this really, really important thing. So for example, time off, these are only some of things that an organization can do for the teachers in this case. Like, for example, giving time off, the possibility of debriefing, that possibility of connection, to have a like good organizational culture in, like, for example, some of you were talking about just talking with their colleagues. And sometimes when your colleagues you have a good relationship, that makes all the difference, right? And then that you understand that management is getting it, it also makes all the difference. So, and finally, having conflict resolution methods within the school, within the organization, that's also very, very helpful. So these are some of the things that the organization can do for us as well. And last is that we want to present you to a tool that we have in CBT, that it's called ProQual, that it's Professional Quality of Life. There's a version that it's Health, ProQual Health, that it's the latest version. It's the nicest one, what I think. And this tool, it's for free and it's available in Ukrainian, so you don't have to struggle with English. And basically what it does, it's like one psychological test, kind of. And so basically what it does, it's to measure how is the support that you're receiving and the satisfaction that you're receiving from your work. And it compares those two things with the negative aspects of helping, which might be when you are very, very tired of caring every day, the burnout that might have, the secondary traumatic stress, and the moral distress. So sometimes it's very difficult to be aware of what is happening to us because we're always in the challenge of doing our work. So these tools sometimes help us to be a little bit more aware of what is happening. It has also some tools that will help you, like, okay, if you scored very high in burnout, then it has some tools that to help you with that particular problem. Or if you score very high in compassion satisfaction, then it says like, okay, well, that's really, really great to feel that even if my work is challenging, I still have like a lot of satisfaction from it, and I want to keep doing it. So you can take as many times this tool as you want, and it's good to have it like regularly to monitor yourself in how you're doing, if you're doing better or worse than 2 or 3 months ago, and then what can you do by yourself to or with your colleagues to make it better. So anyway, so this is Procol Health. If you procol.org, if you follow the steps, you will get there, and then you can take the test, as I said, as many times as you want, and with some of the tools to get you better. So anyway, thank you very much. I think we're on time, but we just want to have like any ideas or any like questions or reflections from you. We would be very happy to answer. And then also Oksana, of course, has our email. So if you want to also say comments, reflections, questions, and we don't have time for this, well, you can send it to Oksana. Oksana will send it to us.
Дуже вам дякую, Карлос і Рус, за таку чудову презентацію і поради. Я думаю, що вони були сьогодні максимально практичними для кожного з вас, і ви зможете їх використовувати під час планування своїх занять, на заняттях та після, звичайно, ще. А у нас є декілька хвилин на запитання, тому якщо у вас є якісь термінові моменти, які б хотіли запитати, напишіть, будь ласка, питання в чаті, і ми його обговоримо. Отже, перше запитання. Які поради ви можете дати вчителю, який сам опинився в кризовій ситуації або ж емоційно вигорів?
Well, it's for me, there's two different things. Like in a crisis situation, it seems like, well, it needs kind of like really quick help, I guess, like if it's to handle this crisis. And if it's in a burnout situation, it's kind of like, it's more chronic. It sounds like it's something that goes on, and then they're feeling exhausted. And the two can be combined, unfortunately. I think for burnout, usually the one of the recommending things is to put a little bit of distance between the work, and then to have a little bit of time to rest. And then to rest purposely, it's not an easy thing to do, because you need to kind of like have the opportunity to empty a little bit of yourself in that rest. So it's purposeful. I think like any kind of like active meditation practices are very good for burnout. So not only resting in your bed, that's great, but also, for example, doing an activity in between that takes you out of the situation, such as reading. Some of you talk about embroidering or knitting. That's very good activities also that are very relaxing, that are meditative, but that it's not only rest, but rest with a purpose. I think you have like a list of resources in the Procol Health as well to deal with these things. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Дякую. Дуже вам дякую. Як допомогти дитині, яка не хоче йти на контакт?
Give them time. I mean, I think like if you give kind of just let them know that you're present there, and then sometimes like children notice very well that you are available, and even like that kind of feeling of availability, that's good enough for them. like pushing too hard to have a contact, that's sometimes generates the opposite response of getting a little bit afraid of that. But if I give a constant message that I'm there for them, and that I'm and the way that they and whenever they are prepared to express themselves, they can do it with me in a safely manner. That's kind of like a very nice. I mean, it's just like the beginning of our response. The response is huge, right? But yes, this is kind of like a little tip that we can have.
Дуже дякую. І перед тим, як перейду до наступного запитання, хотіла сказати всім учасникам, будь ласка, збережіть для себе посилання на ProQOL Health, тому що там дійсно ви знайдете дуже багато ресурсів і зможете зробити таку самооцінку свого стану і знайти корисні поради, що можна, з чого розпочати, що робити і так далі. І наступне питання, воно, в принципі, трошечки пов'язано з нашою загальною темою. З чого можна розпочати турботу про себе серед вчителів? Тобто, які можуть бути якісь прості ідеї, що можна робити?
You want to answer that one, Ruth?
Sure, Carlos. Yeah, so I think part of it is if faculty has kind of meetings where you're doing some planning together, and I think this is also related to where, you know, Carlos was saying, what are the organizational kind of policies or processes that can support staff, that can support teachers. So what are some of those spaces in terms of like debriefing, right? Once a week, or debriefing twice a week, or having even some connection exercises or things like that. But I think organizing around how to kind of connect with each other is a really important first step. I don't know if that's already embedded in the structure at Education USA, but also having opportunities, right, to even come to, right, like sessions like this, witness each other, hear each other's stories, find times to kind of debrief and share ideas, to build connection. And then, when we're thinking about staff care, depending on the specific needs, perhaps there's like consultation or supervision that can also be very supportive to be talking through, right, specific examples of how to deal with, or cope with, for example, what are some resources or strategies that everyone has used when you are working with students who do not want contact or who seem distant? What has worked, right? So having spaces to really be able to talk about that together and to share ideas, I think can be really supportive. And then even things like starting a meditation group together, right? Or starting a group together where you are sometimes like an accountability group, like sharing some of your pre-game strategies and your post-game strategies, and just being able to connect with each other around some of these ideas can be very useful too.
Дуже дякую. Наступне питання, і мені здається, воно останнє. Так, ще є коментарі. Так, це питання від пані Софії. Пані Софії, якщо раптом я неправильно його інтерпретую, будь ласка, включіться, щоб пояснити детальніше. Тут мається на увазі, що у випадку практикування, відходження від усього і звільнення своїх думок від зайвого, як уникнути того, щоб не відійти від дійсності взагалі, тобто як зупинити себе на правильному місці і не поглинутися взагалі, щоб відкинутися від усього світу.
I love it. I really like this question. I think I answered a little bit in the chat because she put, but it's true that avoidance is not the solution for everything, and at some point you have to face the challenges indirectly. I think and just being able to debrief or to talk to this with someone, hopefully if there's any support available for you, that's great. If not, doing with peers, that helps. Just, I would say, when doing with peers, just focusing a little bit on the positive and the strengths without, going away from the challenge, without avoiding it, but just doing it with a positive mind or a strength-based mind, help us to also not become very cynical. When we face these challenges a lot, we might be starting to feel like, nothing's gonna change, everything. We start to feel very negative and sometimes very cynical. So just the tip for doing that, it's like, well, at the end of this talking, just to kind of like get back together what is positive about this situation, what are the strengths that I'm seeing in my students or I'm seeing in myself to face it, will help us to stay like not avoidant, but also not negative and not bitter, So that's kind of like a really short answer for something that it's very big as well. And I hope that there's possibility of support for all of you.
Yeah, and maybe just one add to that as well is to notice when you are practicing activities for care, whether they really are, most of them really are about escapism and taking your mind off things as opposed to release and expression, and trying to find a little bit of a balance between those two kinds of activities to care for yourself. So after, if you're experiencing a lot of stress and you're holding a lot of stress, if you are able to do things like journaling, like writing, expressing, putting on loud music and just or any kind of music that helps you to move it through, giving yourself a chance to have activities as well that really help you to, like Carlos was saying, like confront it or have space to acknowledge the experiences. And then also having those activities that also help you to kind of take your mind off things, right? So noticing a little bit of a balance between those activities. But like Carlos said, this is a big topic.
Дуже вам дякую. Це було останнє запитання. Ще раз хочу подякувати за чудову презентацію і максимально практичні вправи. Я сподіваюся, що всі змогли зануритися, трошки обдумати і порефлексувати. Я нагадую, що всі матеріали будуть доступні за посиланням, які ви отримаєте при нагадуванні про наш вебінар. На цій веб-сторінці є записи попередніх вебінарів, а також я додам усі матеріали після сьогоднішнього вебінару. Ще раз дякую за вашу участь. Чекаю вас наступного вівторка о 5:00 і дякую Карлос і Рут за те, що були сьогодні з нами.